Good morning and welcome to our very first ETI webinar. I'm both very nervous and very excited to meet all of you today. ETI is one of those rare things in the world that brings both joy and dread in equal measure. Hopefully today, SimplePay will help you better understand ETI so that we can bring more joy into your life. Let's start with a brief introduction. So my name is Desmo. I'm the Customer Experience Manager here at SimplePay. And all that means is I run and manage the client-facing team. Joining us today are three special people, Musa, Jamie, and Sherlin. Musa, why don't you give us a little wave quickly?
Hi, guys.
Musa is one of the stars of my team who helps to ensure that the customer experience team are maintaining high levels of service by auditing our team's client interactions. While Jamie and Sherlin are our customer success consultants, so they help our customers maximize the features on SimplePay. Before I hand over to our success team, let me give you a brief overview of today's session. So I know that this ETI basic webinar today is our first one, so we're all very, very excited to be here. But Jamie and Sherlin will be going through the questions in the Q&A asked so that we focus on the basics today and keep some of that for next week, right? So we're going to go back to keeping our focus on the basics today. And what that means is we'll cover what ETI is, what the qualifying criteria is, what a qualifying wage is, and then how to set all of that up in SimplePay.
Let's get stuck into it. I've attended a few webinars in the past before, and they're always very long-winded and also very theory-heavy.
Yes.
So I have a challenge for you. Can you make ETI easy and interesting? And can you also let me know what it is about?
Oh, what a challenge, eh? So I'm definitely going to try and make it as straightforward, as simple as possible. So I think the first step is, Moose, can you share your screen and then show us your company, please?
Okay, sure. I'll be happy to do that.
So in order to meet your challenge, what I'm going to do, Moose, is I'm going to take you through the setup on SimplePay. And as we go along doing things, I'll explain some of the theory behind it, okay? So that it's not that theory heavy. So yeah, first and foremost, let's start with the basics, right? So what is ETI? ETI is this really good initiative that the government came up with, and it stands for Employment Tax Incentive, right? So that's ETI. And what it does is it encourages employers to hire people between the ages of 18 and 29, right? We have a massive unemployment problem in the country. And so ETI is there to encourage people to take a chance on inexperienced young people, right? To employ them in the business. So with that being said, let's go to settings, Musa.
Okay.
So,
great.
Cool. Great. And then we're going to go to payroll calculations and ETI.
Okay. Very straightforward.
Yep. We try and keep it simple. That's the rule of thumb here at SimplePay. Okay. So the first thing we want to set up is the minimum wage input, right? So by default, that's on monthly amount. Musa, do you know what your industry or sector minimum wage is?
So we're using the national minimum wage, and we just rounded it off to 3,800 a month.
Okay, cool. And then just confirm with me, do you have anybody that's paid in hourly rates, or is everyone salaried at the moment in this company we're going to be using for the webinar?
So everyone is being paid monthly. Have no hourly paid employees.
Okay, cool. The reason I asked this question is it's important that if we're paying hourly paid employees and we're dealing with ETI, we want to then set up the minimum wage at an hourly rate. So if you click on monthly amount for me, you'll see that there's a few options, right? So it's not required is the one, then there's monthly amount and hourly rate. But for our purpose, let's stick to keeping it on monthly amount.
Okay. So I'll input the 3,800 over here for the minimum wage monthly.
Right. So this is very important because SARS wants people not to take advantage of the system. So they want people to pay employees above the minimum wage or the minimum wage. And so this is one of the qualifying criteria that we use, right? And the bracket then is between, for your company, would now be between 3,800 and 6,500, which is the end of the bracket for ETI. Okay?
Okay. Great.
Cool. And then are you in a special economic zone by any chance, Moose?
I don't think I am. What is a special economic zone?
So what special economic zones are? They special areas where government wants to encourage employment, right? And so like in Saldanha Bay, in the Western Cape where I am, this would be one of the areas where the qualifying criteria changes slightly. So if you are in a special economic zone, what it does is it removes the age limit of 18 to 29, right? So that you can have more people qualify for ETI and take advantage of this scheme. But for now, let's leave that box unticked, please.
Yeah, I'm not in that zone. Cool.
Cool. And then when would you like to start claiming ETI or using ETI?
So I'm capturing payroll from the 1st of March 2022, and I want to start claiming ETI from March 2022. Can I do that?
Okay. Yes, 100%. So we'll take you through that. So it's effective then from now, this year, right? So save for me, please.
Okay, I'm saving.
Right. So what we did now is we told the system, hey, we're going to start using ETI. So our system will now go in and check your employees to see who they qualify, which one of them qualify. So let's go back to employees, please.
Okay, I'm going there.
Cool. And then which employees are you thinking of claiming ETI for? Do you have an idea of this already?
Yes, so I have 2 employees that meets the qualifying criteria of the age that you mentioned. So
yes.
The first one would be Monica, but she's been with me for more than a year. So I've processed some payslips for already. And then I have a new guy, Peter, who just started this year. So maybe let's start with Monica.
Okay, I'm happy. Click on Monica for me.
All right, great.
Right. So what I want to do quickly is I want to go through some of the qualifying criteria, right? So a cool thing that you can do is click on Edit Info for me now and then go to ETI. So I just want to show you that the system has picked up that Monica meets the qualifying criteria. So it's currently set to qualified, but not claiming yet, right? So we're going to come back to enable this in a moment. But let's jump back to the basic info, please, Musa.
Okay, so I'm going to basic info.
Okay, cool. So some of the qualifying criteria, right, is checked by our system automatically. And I see you have a few help pages open, Musa. Do you mind going to qualifying criteria help page, please?
For the employees. Okay, yes, great. I'll go there.
Great. So that table is exactly what I'm looking for, right? So out of the 6 requirements, the criteria, SimplePay automatically checks 4 of them based on the inputs that you added. Right? So the important stuff like having a valid SA ID, the person must be between that age bracket of 18 to 29, our system checks that, and then the date employed on or after the 1st of October 2013. So remember that ETI was set out initially back in 2014, and it was supposed to only run for a short period of time, but it's actually been extended up until February 2029. That's how good this initiative is, right? So government has extended it. And then the last criteria that SimplePay automatically checks is that the employee is paid more than the minimum wage, but less than 6,500. Okay? The 2 criteria that SimplePay doesn't automatically check, and I need you just to confirm with us, Musa, is 1, that Monica is not a domestic worker and that she's not a connected person.
Yeah, so Monica's definitely not a domestic worker, and we're not related or connected in any way. So I can confirm that.
Cool. So let's go back to her basic info.
Okay.
Right. So the few things we're going to check quickly just to make sure. So the identification type is RSA ID, right? The ID number is captured. So our system validates both the ID number and that it matches with the date of birth. This is very important for ETI. And so there's a few validations on our system to ensure that we don't automatically add employees to have ETI calculated that don't qualify. Okay?
Okay, that's a good safety net.
Yep. Cool. The next thing that we're going to do, so that we're happy with all the qualifying criteria. So they have an ID. How old is Monica? Musa? How quick is your math skills?
So putting me on the spot there, but I think she'll be 23 in December this year. Okay,
cool. That's great. So it falls then between our range that we're looking for. And then she was employed on or after October the 1st, 2013, right?
Yes. So she was
from the 18th of March.
18th.
Great. Yep. And then the final one is related to her wage that she gets. So let's just check the payroll information. one more time.
So she
Great.
earns 4,000 a month.
Yeah, setup looks very straightforward, very simple. So in theory, Monica should qualify for ETI, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to enable it for her by going to edit info, please.
Okay, and then ETI over here.
Yes. Great, right? So like I said earlier, because we set it up in the settings, the system then went and checked on the back end all the qualifying criteria, and it's flagged that Monica does actually qualify, but we're not claiming. So we want to change that. So click on that option for me, please, Moose. Great. So now there's two other options that appear. The first one is qualified claiming, right? That's the one we want. And then disqualified. So in the event that you have a domestic or connected employer working for you, you can actually go set it up in ETI that they got disqualified, right? So that in the event that you have a payroll admin come in and a few years pass, then the setup is set in stone, right? If there are changes, our history tags it below the options that you can see. Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to click on qualified claiming right now.
Correct.
Ooh, right. There's a lot of options.
There is, but don't worry. I'm going to walk you through each one of them individually now. Don't get overwhelmed. This is normal, right? So remember, with government, when they have these lovely initiatives, there's normally a little admin burden around it, right? That requires setup. But once we have this set up for Monica now, you don't have to worry about ETI again. SimplePay will track all the months that she's allowed to claim and then add it to your EMP201. Okay, so this is a once-off thing we're doing. And once we set it up correctly, we don't have to worry about it going forward. Okay?
That's great. That's great.
Cool. So the next input that we have is called employee minimum wage inputs, right? So I know we set up the minimum wage for company-wide at 3,800 Rand, but SimplePay allows businesses to be more flexible, right? So there might be instances where some employees have a different minimum wage than the company-wide one. Can you think of any, Musa?
If I'm not mistaken, my cousin has a factory, he owns a factory, and he has general workers who are earning according to the national minimum wage. But then he also has machine operators who are unionized, and they have a union mandated minimum wage. Would that apply in this instance?
Correct. That you're 100% right. So if there is a different stipulated minimum wage, be it hourly or salary or the amount, then we'd add that here, right? So if you're paying hourly employees, you shouldn't really use monthly amount. You should use hourly rate, and the same is then for salaried employees, right? You want to set it up that's the setup that's applicable for this employee. Okay, so we're going to change it to monthly amount, please.
Okay, so there's a monthly amount.
Oh wait, sorry, no, we're going to leave it on the default. Sorry, Musa.
Yeah, I was about to say I don't have any of that.
Yes,
so we're using my company setup.
Correct, 100%. Sorry, I saw you playing with the things. I mentioned the wrong option. Cool. The next option is also very important. It's called the original employment date. So what this is this is the actual start of the employee-employer relationship with this individual employee, right? Remember, you can only claim ETI for 24 months for individual employees. So sometimes what happens when people join SimplePay, they would then come on and then set the appointment date to be the 1st of March 2022, right? For the start of the tax year. But you shouldn't do that. It should really be the original appointment date that you had with the employee. Okay?
Yes. Okay, I'm with you. Now, I know that Monica went on maternity leave at some point last year. So she started in March 2021. And then a few months later, she went on maternity leave and she wasn't. So do I use the March 2021 original appointment date or when she returned from maternity leave?
Okay, so there wasn't really a break in service, right? Because she was still employed with you. Or was she on paid or unpaid maternity leave?
She was on unpaid maternity leave.
Cool. I'll explain in the next section why I asked that. But what happens is we want the original employment date, right? So when we checked her qualifying criteria earlier, we went through her actual employment date was in the basic info, right? If that is the case, you leave this blank You don't put any data in there at all because we want the system to know that the appointment date captured in the basic info is the one we want to use. Okay?
Okay, great. I'll do that. I'll leave it blank.
Cool. Then the next option is disqualified months before starting to use the system. What do you think this means, Moose?
So there were qualifying criteria that you mentioned. So I'd assume that at any point since she started, there might have been this refers to the months where she didn't meet those qualifying criteria, either through wage or something. So would that mean the months that she was disqualified to have ETI calculated or claimed for?
Correct. So if we think about it, right, Monica she qualified for ETI her entire tenure, right? But that break in that 3-month period was when she received no income from you, right? That's why I asked if it was paid or unpaid. So in reality, her ETI wage dropped to 0, right? And automatically then, if she was getting 0, then she disqualified for that period. So what we're going to capture there is the number 3, because that are the 3 months that Monica didn't qualify for ETI.
Okay, that makes sense.
Cool. And then, yes, go ahead.
I was wondering, you mentioned now she qualified for ETI from the beginning of when she was employed. Yes. So what happened to those months that she qualified, but I didn't claim?
So in the nicest way possible, those months fall away. Like SARS, just because you claim ETI now doesn't mean that you get all of those months again. Because you didn't make use of it for the first 12 months of employment, those fall away. But luckily, because she didn't qualify for 3 of those months, only 9 months fall away. Okay, so you can still claim ETI then for Monica for the 15-month period.
Okay.
But unfortunately, because it's not mandatory, you're not obligated to claim ETI, it fell away.
Okay, I see. That's a pity.
It is, but don't worry, the values you'll see soon will make you very happy. So don't worry too much about that. The next 2 options are linked to the special economic zone, which we touched on that you're not a part of. So all we need to do is just double check that it's on 1 March, which was the effective date you set in settings, and then push save for me, please.
Okay, I'm going to do that now. Okay, so the changes were saved.
Great.
Can I go in and check it?
Yes, you can double check.
Okay, so there's an audit trail as to what changes are made as well. So I can see any values that change after I've made this initial update.
Correct. Right, so one thing I want to show you quickly before we move on is, can you go to the filing tab for me, please, Moose?
Sure, let's go there.
Cool. So now the first things to note is that the system is telling us, hey, there's 5 draft payslips being excluded from the submission. And so generally, if you have drafts, you shouldn't finalize until you've processed all your payroll, right? All your payslips. So what I want you to do is just take a look quickly at the web EMP201, please.
Okay, I'm just clicking there. So this is blank now for the moment.
Yes, and the reason it's blank is because we didn't finalize any payslips. SimplePay needs finalized payslips in order to generate submissions and to generate reports for us. Okay? So we're going to come back to this page with more data once we do some finalization of payslips. Right? So we know that Monica is done. Before we jump off to Peter, I think it's time for a poll, don't you?
Yeah, that would be a great idea.
Cool. So we'll give everyone a chance to look at the true or false question. So there are 6 checks to ensure an employee is eligible to claim ETI. SimplePay automatically determines eligibility of 4 of those criteria, true or false. Let me just get the results of our poll quickly. Great. So 92% of our audience got it correct. SimplePay does check the 4 of the criteria automatically, right? So that's a very, very good result for us. Cool. Let's move on, Moose.
Excellent. So we said we needed to just wrap up the other employee.
Yes, because Monica is sorted. Yes, Monica's sorted, she's done, she's ready to go. The last thing we would need to do with her is finalize her payslip. But let's look at Peter before we finalize payslips.
Okay, so Peter is a very young guy that I just hired. I saw a lot of potential in him. So yeah, I'm very happy to have him on board, and I'm excited to claim ETI for him. So I'm going to try and do this on my own to see if I remember the steps.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I like that initiative from you. But before we get there, let's just take a look at Peter Parker's payroll information. I saw there was an additional item of medical aid. Okay, so
Yes.
from the beginning of this year, there was some changes made to the qualifying wage for ETI. So if you don't mind, I see you have it open. Do you mind going to the middle tab for the help site, please? The one that says qualifying wage. Click on that for me. Cool. Yes. Scroll slightly up for me. So this is where ETI can get very confusing at times, right? Because ETI has different definitions for qualifying wage and remuneration for ETI. So they're two very different things. The qualifying wage is first to see if people qualify, right? And then once we qualify, we then look at the various payslip items to calculate what remuneration for ETI is, and therefore what we can claim ETI for. Okay?
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, the wage is used to check if they qualify for ETI. That's one of the qualifying criteria. And the remuneration, what they earn, is actually used to determine how much ETI I get.
Correct. That's 100% correct, right? And so another factor that's taken into account, but we'll touch on more in our second session when we actually look at the calculations next week, is that the wage is also grossed up and capped at 160 hours. So in the event that you have employees who work more than that, we'll only be able to use their first 160 hours, right? But it can get slightly complicated. That's why we've left it for the advanced session, okay? One more change that came into effect that impacts qualifying wage from the 1st of this year is that there are now special items that impact that ETI for remuneration. So if you go to calculating ETI, help page for me, please, Moose, and you scroll down, these are some of the items, right? So it's things like garnishes, income protection, maintenance orders. There's a list of it on our help site that shows what BCA deductions are and then non-BCA deductions. If you have some custom items that you created on SimplePay, you can also indicate to the system that ETI should be looked at for this item. Okay?
Okay, fantastic. And I'm sure we'll go into more detail in the next session.
100%. Like I wanted to add that as well now. Like we're going to go into more depth in the advanced session when we look at the calculations. But for now, let's go back to Peter because I think he had a medical aid item added.
Yes.
Okay. So even though the wage for Peter Parker and Monica Geller are very similar, basic salary wise, the medical aid will impact how ETI is calculated for this employee. Okay.
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay. So now let's see if you remember how to set ETI up for Peter Parker.
Okay. Let's do this challenge. So I'm going to edit info. I know that the system checked and confirmed that he is qualified, but it defaulted to not claiming. I need to manually change that to say I want to claim. Okay. The employee minimum wage inputs, because I don't have different wage inputs or minimum wage requirements, I'm going to use the company default setup that I've set in my settings.
Yep.
My original employment date, because he's a new employee and he just started now in March and there's not been any changes, I'm going to leave this field blank. I'm not going to put anything in.
Yep.
Disqualified months before starting to use the system, he's very straightforward. It's the first month that I'm claiming ETI for him, and it's his first month of employment, so this field should actually be left blank.
Okay.
And then I'm not in any special economic zones, so I'll be leaving these unchecked, and I'll be setting my effective date to be the 1st of March, which is my first payslip, and then I'll save.
100% correct, Musa. So now you've enabled for ETI for Peter Parker, right? Like it's sorted, it's ready to go. That's it. So ETI is enabled, and all you need to do then month to month is finalize payslips. Okay, so let's do that quickly together as we wrap up, because we're about 80% there, right? It's that simple. So let's go to pay runs.
Okay. And then I'm going to finalize my payslips for March.
Yes, please. So remember, you're finalizing because SimplePay needs finalized payslips in order to generate reports and our submission data.
I like this feature where it shows me the changes that I've made as well. And it's also telling me that this is Peter's first payslip. If I'm happy, I can just tick that box and then finalize.
Correct. Great. So now that we finalized all the payslips, the last thing I'd like you to do, Musa, and this is one of those best practice things that we always encourage people to do, is create the pay run. Right, so remember, you can manually now do payroll and transfer all the money into your employees' accounts, but by creating the pay run, you then create the file for EFT uploads, right, for you to do batch payments in your bank, and it allows you to post to any Xero or QuickBooks integrations with accounting software. Okay, so that's the pay run for us. That looks good, so let's go back. So now that we've closed off that month and that period, let's go to our submission data. So in theory, let's think of it as you just paid your employees, right? You're happy,
yes.
You paid them, everyone is good. Let's go wrap up the month. So now the thing that you'll notice on the screen is that April has already started. So if you click on the April bar, it will then show us that we have some unfinalized payslips. So it rolls over into the next month as you finalize payslips. Okay?
That's pretty neat. I like that.
Cool. So the crux of the matter now is going to be clicking on the web view for EMP201 Explanation.
Okay.
And if we set everything up correctly, then yeah, there should be data here. Lovely.
Wow.
Okay.
So I can see there's my pay-as-you-earn liability of 11,000 Rand, SDL UIF. So the total payroll, I need to pay that amount to SARS. But now I'm seeing difference. Yeah, I'm seeing different things here. Can you explain this for me, please?
Right. So for me, the easiest way to explain this is I have a cupcake analogy, right? So bear with me. I know it sounds insane, but it's going to help you understand this much easier. Right.
I like cupcakes, so I'm with you.
That's good. That's good. So let's say you have 5 employees, right? You pay each of them 10 cupcakes, right? So they don't get their money anymore, no rands, rands is out of the window, you're paying them in cupcakes, right? You give each of them 10 cupcakes. That's their remuneration. Now, SARS wants you as the employer to withhold PAYE, right? So you take from each of them 2 cupcakes, right? And you put all of that in your bowl. So what the EMP201 does is it then shows us what we need to pay over to SARS, right? So we collected 2 cupcakes from all your staff members. That means our liability for PAYE is 10 cupcakes, right? So before we hand that over to SARS, ETI says, hold on, you can keep some of those cupcakes for yourself, right? And in this, on our screen, we see that your ETI calculated was about 2,700 Rand. So let's round up to 3 whole cupcakes, right? For our cupcake analogy. Then what happens is you take 3 cupcakes out of your bowl, right? You put them to one side. That's yours. There's no income tax on it. That's your free money that you got because you're using ETI, right? And so now you hand over 7 cupcakes to SARS, right?
Okay.
On your EMP201, though, you're reporting everything. So SARS will know about the 10 cupcakes. But because we use ETI, we're going to keep those 3 cupcakes for ourselves, right? So we're reporting it to SARS. They're aware of it. But we've gotten lucky by keeping 3 cupcakes for ourselves. That's it. That's ETI in a nutshell.
That's very simple, the concept. I like that. So I have to withhold pay-as-you-earn, and then ETI allows me to keep some of that pay-as-you-earn that I should have paid over to SARS for myself as the business, and I pay a reduced amount of pay-as-you-earn over to SARS. But they are aware of everything because SimplePay has generated this document that provides all that information to SARS that I need to report.
Correct.
That makes life so much easier.
So instead of the liability you mentioned, the 13,000, you're actually only paying over 10,480 Rand to SARS. right? Because you benefited from employing young people and paying them within that bracket. That's ETI, right? That's how simple it is. At this point, you finalize this EMP201 and complete your submission through e-filing, and then you would be done and you can go on with your week, right? But before we do any of that, before we wrap up, let's take a look at the ETI calculator quickly. So one of the things SimplePay does is it shows you the breakdown for the different employees that you have.
Oh.
Okay.
So I can see how much ETI was calculated for each individual.
Correct. Correct. So in next week's session, we'll break down the calculations, right? We'll take a look into why Monica's current version gives us 1.5 and then Peter's only 1,225 rand, right? So we'll take a look into that deeper in next week's session. But for now, you can see where this breakdown happens. Okay?
Okay. That's
cool.
Great.
Then one final thing, let's go back to the submissions page. So you're going to go back and then back one more time. So once you've done your submission and you've paid SARS, right, we want you to finalize this EMP201 because we want to close off the period. And if there were any changes made to payroll that impacted March, then SimplePay will generate a new version of the EMP201. So it's very important that you create pay runs and you finalize your submissions, right? It gives you a better audit trail so you can see when changes are happening. It also shows you the date finalized, right? So one final thing, Musa, before we hand it back to Sherlyn and Jamie, is if you can go to the reports tab for me, please.
Okay.
So let's say you as an owner of a business, you didn't set up any of this, but you want to take a look at your business to see if you guys are utilizing ETI, then you can come in and pull up an ETI report and it will give you a breakdown for the period and the different employees who you were able to claim ETI for. Okay?
Okay, wonderful. And I can select the date range that I wish to report on and I can specify individual employees.
Correct.
And active, inactive. That's fantastic.
100%. Right, and so again, ETI reports we're going to touch on a little more in next week because it goes in a little in depth, but that's really all it is for basic setup of ETI. It's as simple as that.
Thank you, Desmond. Really appreciate this.
Cool. I hope I met your challenge. I hope that was interactive enough for you. So without further ado, let's hand over to Jamie and Sherlyn so we can ask our audience for some questions.